You're kind of looking at a problem from the margins when you've been marginalized, when you're kind of having an experience that no one else is having, or it's not really talked about. You can look at that elephant and say, that's an elephant, you guys. Like, what?
Join Jenny and I as we unpack diversity in leadership that starts with us. Welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with my very special guest, and we met in a really unusual way. Jenny Vazquez-Newsum. Let me say that again, Jenny. Jenny Vazquez-Newsum. There we go. Founder, CEO, Untapped Leaders, and this is the part that I love. Not just that, but author of a frickin' book, and I love it. Untapped Leadership. And so we were just talking about that before I hit record. Yeah. Welcome to this. So the unusual way Jenny and I met was through LinkedIn. Jenny had a posting because she's expanding the bench of her business, Untapped Leaders. I applied, didn't make the final cut, all good. Jenny and I connected. And I'm looking forward to other stuff down the road. And so I think this is a fun story to say, you know what? Just because the initial thing didn't work out, connect with people and figure out something down the road on how it works. Absolutely. And so I appreciate your opportunity, you coming on the podcast so we can talk about it, because I love the work that your organization is doing. Yeah. So the quote that I'm going to kick us off with is Mahatma Gandhi. Our ability to reach unity and diversity will be the beauty and the test of our civilization. And so I know you're working with marginalized groups around leadership and developing that capability. It's near and dear to my heart, even though people look at me and go, really, Michele? Really? Yes. Because the thing is, and I was telling somebody the other day, when I grew up, there wasn't color distinctions, there wasn't culture distinctions, so I wasn't raised in a household that highlighted differences. We all have the human element. And so my learning has been through my journey is the fact this other stuff exists. And so I help leaders and coach leaders through, being the best human that they can be and creating those moments. But I think it's also important for us to realize this stuff exists and what are we going to do about it? Yeah. So Jenny, welcome to the conversation. Say a little bit more about Untapped Leaders and what you do around, with marginalized leaders, because I know it's cohort based. And then we'll kind of chat about all that stuff and how things intersect. So welcome.
Yes, thank you, Michele. I'm so happy to be in conversation with you. And again, I'm glad you highlighted this, like how we've crossed paths and how you can cross paths and stay connected on a path, which is, it doesn't happen as often as I would like. And so I appreciate this opportunity.
We're going to start a trend. We're going to start a trend.
Like it. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, so Untapped Leadership really is around centering marginalized perspectives in leadership, because my background with a couple decades of doing leadership work, of studying leadership in my grad courses all the way through my doctoral level classes, I just came to the realization that a lot of these like core traditional frameworks all were authored by folks that didn't look like me, didn't have kind of the same lived experiences. There was a lot more that I thought was missing in the story of how we define leadership. And so that's really where the writing of Untapped Leadership came about. And it's really harnessing the power of underrepresented leaders to add to this narrative of like, how can we define leadership in a way that is aware of all these differences and kind of the beauty of it, and really connected to that quote of like the beauty that can come from really being conscious of all the ways that we could lead, not just what has been, quote unquote, published in recent history. Like there's so much more. And so that's really the work that I do with Untapped Leaders, is really trying to kind of, explore that really deliberately on what parts of ourselves, our insights, our ingenuity, do we kind of shelve when we think about leadership, that we don't bring in, that we don't bring into work, just based off of a lot of, kind of historical realities and current realities for those that kind of have marginalized identities, maybe not seeing themselves represented in the C-suite. What will happen if we like really purposely shine a light into those aspects of ourselves and actually say that that's actually core to who we are as leaders? So my hypothesis is that a lot will happen, that we
Yeah.
have a lot of the answers, the tools, the creativity, the insights that we need, particularly in this moment,
Mhm.
where, I feel like we're desperate for, inclusive innovations, just equitable practices, all these aspects of work.
Mhm.
And I just want to find those answers in places that we might have overlooked in these last few
Yeah.
centuries. So,
It's interesting, when you were talking, my brain typically, anybody who knows me, it goes 50 zillion directions. And I have visuals when you're talking, and part of it too is that when we show up as our true authentic selves, okay, um, people feel it.
mm-hmm,
So all of a sudden, I think we're in a better position to have really great connections with the
yeah,
people that we're in the room with, or the human that's sitting in front of us, because they're not guarding against something they're feeling like, what are
right,
you not telling me?
right,
Right?
right.
Because we're showing up as us. There was a friend of mine, client for a really long time. I'm still her coach, but we're friends. And I remember her preparing for interviews and she was frustrated because she wouldn't get them,
Mm,
but she was over prepared and over polished and everything else. And the stuff I kept telling her is, show up as you.
yeah,
Don't show up as someone who's perfect and polished and everything else. Let them in, because what happens is, if we do that and we polish ourselves up so perfect, people can't see who we are,
yeah.
and they're going to hold themselves back too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what it's so true. It's like the shine goes
Yeah,
away. You're almost,
yeah,
yeah, I just kind of see like there's a dulling of
yeah.
our essence. And on the flip side, and this is what I would be interested in exploring with you as well, is that paradox of authenticity, where when you do, there is a particular uh, sometimes expectation of how we show up as a professional, as a leader, as like really this performance of we can do, there's this piece of it that we have to present ourselves in a certain way. And yet it then starts to edge into, you know, uh, releasing some of that authenticity, and we don't see that authenticity. And I'm interested from your perspectives as well, because I talk a lot about this with, the leaders I work with, where,
Yeah.
being truly authentic as a leader of color, as someone, with, any type of aspect of self that is not yet represented at work, or maybe sometimes called unprofessional, a lot
Mhm.
of different layers to this, that there's a risk to bringing your full authenticity in those moments. And so, how do you balance this tightrope of an experience
Yeah,
of like
it's
bringing the authentic self, but then also knowing that there can be
well, and
bias
so
or
it's interesting you
assessment
say
about
that,
that?
because it's
Yeah.
this it's not a pendulum, right? And it shouldn't be a pendulum. I'm bringing none of me, you're going
Yeah.
to have everything,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Because it's almost like I look back, and I did it with my kids, and I remember my mom saying this, use your inside voice,
Hmm.
right? So I think so I can be me, okay, and I can be me, appropriately me,
Hmm.
in a professional setting. I can be me at a family picnic. I can be me, just hanging out with me and my dog, right? They're all me,
Yeah.
but they're different degrees of me,
Mm.
right? So when I hear that, it's like, it doesn't mean that every aspect, the loud, the blah, are there, okay? But the other thing, part of it too, is when I hear people, because I've had clients in front of me, that the phrase, and it probably resonates with you, is around executive presence.
Hmm.
There is some assumed meaning that a
Hmm.
lot of people take on, not necessarily that someone has explicitly said that to them, but
Hmm.
they take on around, what is it to show up with executive presence?
Hmm.
And it's like, and so I ask people, because there's this underlying assumption that there's a shared meaning of executive presence. Executive presence is a level of confidence, authenticity, you know, credibility, everything else that you show up with of
Right.
who you are in the role that you're stepping into, which is if you're the leader of people, you need to be able to be transparent and honest with them, and you have to give them hope.
Yeah. Right.
So, but how do you show up as an executive with executive presence in that moment? Does it mean, because I had one client say, well, I guess I laugh too much, so I've got to work on my executive presence. Excuse me?
Mm-hmm.
There's an underlying assumption that if I'm going to show up with executive presence,
Right.
I'm not enjoying myself and there's no
Right.
laughter. And I'm going to say BS.
Right. Right.
So I think it's those things, in all honesty, Jenny, as we show up as who we are, appropriate level of stuff, your inside voice, if you're inside,
Mm,
I'm not going to be screaming out laughing, unless it's appropriate.
mm,
So we use EQ.
yeah.
We have emotional intelligence to navigate through stuff. We're reading the room to go, oh my gosh, is this the room that can't handle all of me?
Right.
And so we adjust. I think all those things are elements of being authentic and being appropriate in the room that you're in,
Yeah.
so that you don't have to leave you at the door
Mm-hmm.
when you walk into the room, but gauge it. And I think it comes with practice, but also checking the narrative that we may have going about what it means to be fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that, so a lot of the work that I do, um, I really try to bring context into the leadership work because a lot of times, at least what I've found, it's just not that easy. There's no like, okay, do these three things and you're a leader or you're going to be great. All these, it's really complex. And so even
Mhm,
connected to this conversation, the context within which we are in a executive boardroom,
mhm,
and we kind of have these ideas of what executive presence
mhm,
are.
mhm,
We're looking to the executives, or we're looking to those that have reached these echelons of positions, and really it's being defined there.
mhm,
And really my emphasis a lot of times is, and why I work with leadership in particular is because if that's our opportunity to really shape the way we
yes.
all can engage in the workplace, where
Mhm,
we're thinking about, okay, I see my executive or the person that I report to, or
mhm,
the president and CEO, and they're being really authentic, and they're being humorous, and they're
mhm,
asking me about my weekend, all these aspects that actually shift a great deal in the
mhm,
workplace. So then now, the rest of us, when we enter in, we're like, oh, okay, I can take
mhm,
a deep breath. I can bring in, I see them
mhm,
being authentic. I can be authentic too.
mhm,
And again, coming back to that hypothesis, the more we bring in more of our realities, our content and
mhm.
contextual realities, the better we'll be at solving, gnarly challenges or navigating conflict even, or really just
Yeah.
kind of just being in space, working towards a collective vision or output,
Mhm,
whatever we're gathered towards in an organization, we're going to be all the better for it.
mhm.
And so, and it's not easy. And that's a piece of it. It's
No,
really,
it takes intentionality, right?
yeah.
So all the stuff that you're talking about, especially when we're dealing with leaders that have prescribed to a different way of leadership,
Hmm.
and maybe not by intentional choice, just by default,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's where the intentionality comes in. It's like the most basic stuff because I coach leaders at all levels. I mean, so and it's so funny how we assume, oh, you've arrived at this place. Yeah, you're a senior VP over whatever region that you're over, and so obviously XYZ.
Yeah.
When I go in and work with clients, I don't assume anything. So the person sitting across from me is a human. I need to find out what the goal is. And I end up with
Mhm.
senior leaders that sometimes the reason they're involved in is because they were told
Mm,
that you're going to be part of this program too.
mhm,
And so the goal is to go, okay, great. So what matters to you?
mm,
And I had one leader, he goes, I really don't want to talk about it. I said, great, talk to me about stuff that maybe when you walked away after that situation was done, you went, God, that could have gone better.
yeah. Yeah.
Because that's the stuff to work on.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I approach this thing and I'll ask the most basic questions. So the people in the room that you were engaging with, what mattered to them?
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so it's this basic stuff that
Right.
people can start to show up. These are well-intentioned leaders.
Of course.
They're so into this, it got cascaded to me,
Hmm.
and I've got to go to execute. Okay. And their idea is I need to cascade this down and convince these people to do what they need to do.
Mm.
Okay, that's one way. So
Hmm.
imagine the visual and the words that you're doing as I cascade this down or shove it down. Your body's reacting and your energy is going
Hmm.
to show up based on the words that you just said,
Yep.
versus, hey, this initiative came down. Let me wrap my brain around it so I can understand
Yep.
what it is, the impact of what it is. Let me get to where I'm like, okay, I'm supportive of this.
Yeah.
And now here's a differentiator, if you will. Let me engage with my team, not cascade down or shove things down,
Right.
and share with them what's going on, the thinking, and let me find out,
That's
right?
right.
There's a conversation happening, what matters to them, how they're feeling about it,
That's right.
which is different. And guess what it does to the leader sitting in front of me? The pressure comes off
Hmm. Hmm.
because now they can be themselves. Let me
Right.
wrap my brain around it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to engage my team. Let me find out instead of I have to have all the answers.
That's right. That's right. And that's the thing is that I think if you kind of look at historical definition of leader, just how we've kind of defined what leadership is, we are always looking at that singular person,
Yeah.
the hero, the one that has all the answers, that's like impervious to challenges, that can like put on the cape and
Yes.
save the day. And that's just not realistic. And
Mm-mm.
it's you know, a limiting in that sense.
Yeah.
We're better when we have everyone engaged. And so a
Mm-hmm.
big piece of this work around context and contextual leadership is having leaders that are in kind of these positions of authority that maybe have entered into the work thinking that they have to have all the answers. It's all riding on them. There
Mm-hmm.
is a reality there, in that. But how do you take the opportunity to share context,
Mm-hmm.
to lead in that sense, to say, these are our constraints, these are our priorities as an organization, this is where I see limitations, this is where I don't have the answers, this is where I'm not sure what to do. What are your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts? Let's talk about this. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
really reframing leadership to be, leaders to not have a team, they're part of a team.
Mm-hmm.
So leader has a role,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not the sole and only role.
Mm-mm.
They're not the ones that are going to make it happen or to, motivate others. It really should be a kind of a dynamic, organic,
Mm-hmm.
um, and trust-filled
Mm-hmm.
partnership in the work. That's the only way that we're really gonna, I don't know, do anything meaningful, to be honest.
And it's freaking respectful
Yeah.
to where you hire really bright, intelligent
Mhm.
humans and then you tell them what to do. And
Yeah.
it's like, and it's so myopic on that because I think about as a leader, as a human, I have a perspective
Hmm.
on what I hear, what I see, problem situation. I have mine. I
Yeah.
just have mine.
That's it.
I
Yep.
can't make really great decisions if
Yep.
the only perspective involved in my decision making is mine.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
And I go back to I was a coach for some leadership development thing, and so I take nuggets from everywhere, right? And this one nugget that I got was the analogy was decision making leadership is similar to like GPS with satellites, right?
Mhm.
Way back when it was Tom Garmin, right? There was a satellite, so the accuracy was not that great.
Yeah.
Right. And literally that's where you had Seinfeld that it's like, okay, take a ride up here, and he drives into a lake,
Right.
because that was the accuracy because of the perspectives, if you will,
Hmm.
to the navigation. Today, I use Waze with wherever I go. If I were to, Waze says, hey, in 125 feet, take a left-hand turn. If I had stopped my car in that moment, got out and measured, odds are he's pretty freaking close.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Because there's more touch points, the accuracy is better. And those
Hmm.
touch points and those satellites are the same thing with the people on our team.
Hmm.
Find out what other people are thinking and seeing and hearing. so that the quality of your decision making is better, and the weight and the magnitude of the stress of making it is better,
Right.
because you're gonna be in a better position to hear those perspectives. And guess what? You're not gonna have to strong arm people on your team that this is the way we go, because as my mentor says, the fingerprints of their thinking is on the outcome of the decision you've arrived at. And they're supporting it as you guys are coming to that decision.
Right. Right. And again, it's like, it's strengthened so much by these other perspectives. I similarly to the kind of the GPS example, I used an example. There's a photo of an elephant and like people really close up to the elephant, looking at what it is and defining it in different ways. Like, oh, it's a rug. Oh, it's a rope, or all these things. And the case I make, particularly with Untapped Leadership, is that, when you're kind of looking at a problem from the margins, when you've been marginalized, when you're kind of having an experience that no one else is having, or it's not really talked about, you can look at that elephant and say, that's an elephant, you guys. Like, what? What are you talking about? And that's a hugely important perspective.
Yeah.
To be sure that you're incorporating in organizations. And so a lot of times, it doesn't necessarily always have to fall around identity markers. It could be based on position that, the entry level, the intern will be able to see an elephant that the CEO might not be able to see, because it's just based off of that position. And so how do you build a culture, build communication, build practices that encourage and make sure that those that can see the elephant are able to say that, especially when, I think with leadership, we want to have all the answers, we want to have control, we want to make sure that we know everything. When it kind of gets us in our blind spot or something that we weren't aware of, that it's not a defensive reaction, it's wow, thank you for bringing this insight. Thank you. That's really valuable, and let's incorporate that and have that be the dynamic. Which, because I think a lot of times I've just witnessed, like, when these alternative perspectives or these other these aspects get kind of mentioned or called out, there is resistance on the upper levels, and that's really something to navigate.
Yeah, and here's what happens, right? And this would be from leaders that historically, maybe it's a fear-based organization, or those kind of perspectives weren't welcome, or whatever it may be, right? Because I mean, when I run smack dab in the fear-based, I'm like, oh, dude, we got a whole nother problem that we're dealing with here.
That's right.
And so you have leaders that are exhausted if they're trying to shield their teams from the rest of that crap. But what's interesting is when, as a leader, when you start to go on a different path and you decide, you know what, this all sounds awesome, I want to do this, I'm going to tell you right now, it's freaking hard. All right, because you're going against your wiring, even though you desire for it to be something different.
That's right.
But pay really close attention when you start to encourage people to check their voices in and get it, what your reaction is. And your reaction can be just a facial expression. So you've really got to watch what your thinking is and ready yourself and set the intention of, I'm now going to listen to what's going on. I'm opening up the floor to hear perspectives. And oh, by the way, there's no such thing as a bad idea or a bad thought. None. And you need to keep telling yourself that, because people are watching you. They're watching you to see, is it safe to step in?
Right. And I think, the piece around kind of context that I usually name is, the context is there, whether we call it out or not, whether we name it or not, whether we accept it or not, like these realities exist. And so the most equipped, the most, I think, impactful leaders are the ones that are like grounded in that contextual reality, that when there is a feedback that is, on them, that's something that they, fell short with or whatnot, that it is a reality. So whether or not you've created space to encourage those that report to you or those that kind of under you to share that, it still exists. It's still there. Like even
Yeah.
if that element is not voiced, it's still part of context. And so the best we can do as leaders is to really be relentless of trying to understand, what motivates folks, what are their
Yeah.
fears, what are the
Yeah.
limitations, where am I getting in the way of you bringing your best self to work, and really kind of making those assumptions.
Well, and
Hard.
so when I hear that, there's a couple of things that come to mind is encourage the feedback. Be ready for the feedback. Don't defend why you did what you did. Do not just say thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate your feedback. And be ready for it, because people typically aren't giving feedback to hurt other people, doing it to improve experiences. So I think it's important for people to ready themselves and keep that narrative going too, because it's hard when the feedback we may be getting, especially as a leader he's trying to do the right thing. The feedback that you're getting is that what you're doing is not landing as intended. And it could feel like a stab to the heart.
Right.
And so for me, the coaching I'll give, and I do it myself, as if your intention is the right intention, please take that as feedback of here's what better looks like, or here's what a little bit better looks like. But it's not that you completely missed the mark.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, but it can be, it's tough. I mean, it's a tough space to be in, because we're humans that care about other humans.
That's right.
And if I've done something that I think didn't land, I'm like, oh my, that's not even what I intended. It's like, but okay, so what does it look like to be better next time?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Jenny, I so freaking appreciate this time. You and I could be in a room with you for hours and just chat.
We sure can.
It's probably not the best thing for a leadership sound bites podcast. I would love to have you back on at some point in the future, if you're open to that, to talk about other stuff,
Absolutely.
because there's so many layers
So
to
much.
this. And I so appreciate your ability to clearly articulate different aspects of it, is probably the best way to say it.
Yeah.
So question for you, what one or two things in this topic that we talked about would you like people to walk away with?
Yes. So if you are, I would say, if you're in a position of leadership, of a position of authority, share the context, just be authentic and real.
Yeah.
And I think you'll see everyone thrives in that type of exchange. And if you're kind of, on that trajectory towards leadership, really, honestly, for me, it's really trying to define what leadership means to you. It might not be what you've been told or given or studied, it just really spend time reflecting on what it actually is for you. And I think the stronger, the more awareness we have on our own leadership style and preference and just way of doing, I think the more we can just broaden the approach, just widen the ways that this can happen. And so that's what I would
I
say.
agree. I'll piggyback on that a little bit, because what came to mind when you were talking is some people may not have clearly identified those things, right? Or maybe you're stepping in going, no, I'm authentic. I would ask you or encourage you to challenge how authentic you are. Okay. And this is a way to identify maybe when that's showing up. Do you have situations or things that you're going into, a situation you're going into that you're like dreading, that's this heavy weight that exhausts you when you're stepping into it? I would ask people just to go a little bit layer deeper and ask yourself, what story do I have going around who I need to be when I step into X, whatever X may be? Who do I think I need to be? Where's that coming from? Because I think that's where we can start to unearth where we have things or expectations we're giving ourselves that don't align to who we are authentically are. So I think that's where we can start uncovering some of those things. But the stuff that weighs real heavy on us is typically an indicator that we're dragging shit that's not our shit to drag.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Snaps
So,
to that one.
yes. Thank you. Until next time, this has been Leadership Soundbites with Michele and Jenny. And please check out, I'll give in the description, contact how to people get a hold of you. And so
Perfect.
until next time,
Yes.
have a great one. Thank
You
you.
too. Thanks, Michele.